Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, a Trump-Xi truce buys time.
I thought it was an amazing meeting. He's a great leader of a very powerful, very strong country, China. And what can I say? We have, it was an outstanding group of decisions, I think, that was made, and we've come to conclusion on many very important points.
The conversation in South Korea between Presidents Trump and Xi that Trump is calling truly great, ending with a one-year truce between the two nations. We'll bring you to South Korea and drill down on the details of what was discussed regarding fentanyl tariffs, soybean sales, rare earth minerals, and more, when Anja Manuel, executive director of the Aspen Security Group, joins us up ahead. Plus, the big earnings news just out in the last hour from Apple and Amazon, both on the move after the close. We'll have Bloomberg Tech's Ed Ludlow on hand to cover it all for us. And tonight, the headlines causing consternation here in Washington, the president ordering nuclear weapons tests for the first time in decades after Russia announced that it would test its own nuclear-powered underwater drone and nuke-capable cruise missile. What happens next? We'll speak with Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan on that and more. And senators on Capitol Hill begin showing a glimpse of optimism on kickstarting talks to end the government shutdown just 24 hours ago. Now they're leaving town as SNAP benefits are on the cusp of running dry and the nation's starting to feel shortages at the airport. We'll speak to Congressman Sam Graves about a potential way ahead in just a few moments. But we begin with the high-stakes meeting between Presidents Trump and Xi in South Korea on the sidelines of the APEC summit, both leaders emerging from their sit-down with a one-year trade truce, but no immediate structural changes to the long-standing imbalance between the U.S. and China that Trump has promised that he would overhaul. And on issues like fentanyl and soybeans, progress, along with some gray area when it comes to Nvidia's semiconductor chips. Listen.
We did discuss chips, and they're going to be talking to Nvidia and others about taking chips. We're not talking about the Blackwell. That just came out yesterday. But a lot of chips, a lot of the chips. And that's good for us.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall has been traveling across Asia following the president on his many stops and joins us now for the latest from South Korea. Tyler, what can you tell us?
Hey, Joe, good evening. Well, it's clear that this easing of tensions is welcome, but as our analysts at Bloomberg Economics point out, it does not address those key fundamental core issues that help contribute to the standoff between the U.S. and China in the first place, mainly national security, unbalanced trade, and of course, the two countries jockeying for the best position when it comes to dominance in tech. Now, China is about to see an immediate reduction when it comes to their tariffs, as President Trump has pledged to cut that 20% tariff related to fentanyl in half over what he says is a commitment from China to curb those precursor chemicals used to make the drug. This is considered to be significant because it's going to be a boon to China's export market ahead of a critical holiday season. Just for context here, Chinese exports to the U.S. have fallen 17% this year alone. Beyond that, though, a lot of what we got out of this meeting appears to be a pullback from recent escalations in just the past few weeks, right? China's going to delay those planned export curbs on critical and rare earth minerals, and as you mentioned, resume purchases of U.S. soybeans. The U.S. is also taking threats off the table, including those fees imposed on Chinese ships at American ports, a key concession Beijing wanted to see. But as you mentioned, Joe, there were things on the table that we were expecting could be discussed but didn't quite yield some of the results, including President Trump saying that he did not discuss Nvidia's Blackwell chips with Chinese President Xi Jinping. He also said that they discussed ending the war in Ukraine, but we haven't seen any signs that China is going to curb its imports of Russian energy supplies.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall following a long day in South Korea. Tyler, thank you so much for your reporting. One of the unexpected headlines to emerge from this face-to-face was the possibility of an energy deal. President Trump writing in part on Truth Social, China also agreed it will begin the process of purchasing American energy. A very large-scale transaction may take place concerning the purchase of oil and gas, he says, from the great state of Alaska. Unquote. Joining us now with his reaction live from Capitol Hill is Republican Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska, a member of both the Senate Armed Services Committee and Senate Commerce Committee. It's good to see you, Senator. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. I don't know how much you know about this deal. We spoke with Energy Secretary Wright a bit earlier today. He apparently is going to begin engaging on this potential for a deal. Is Alaska going to become China's gas station?
Well, look, details matter, and I saw Secretary Wright's interview as well. But look, I want to just first do a thanks to President Trump. He has been relentless, Joe, on promoting Alaska energy, LNG, oil, critical minerals. We had a huge deal that he announced last week. So he and his cabinet have been tremendous supporters of Alaska natural resources. And by the way, that's great for my constituents, but it's really good for America. And it's a huge contrast to the previous administration. Joe Biden's issued 70 executive orders and actions singularly focused to shut down Alaska's resource development and economy. John Kerry went overseas to our Asian allies saying, don't buy American LNG, if you can believe that. He did. So it's a giant contrast. So again, a big thanks to President Trump and his team. Now look, I saw Secretary Bessent said, hey, it was the Chinese who actually asked about Alaska energy, oil, and natural gas. And to be honest, I'm not surprised. The Alaska LNG project is making huge progress right now. And I think the big headline from the president's trip wasn't what Xi Jinping was asking about energy from Alaska. It was the progress that the Trump administration made in Japan, in Korea on our big LNG project. So, you know, with regard to China, get in line. There's a lot of Asian countries that want American LNG from Alaska. It's exciting. It's strategic. It's going to help our country. It's going to help our allies, and it's going to help my state.
Well, you know, and this is something that we talked about when we were together in the Senate. I believe, by the way, that was day one of the government shutdown, or maybe it was -1. I'll have to go back and check. But it sounds to me like, and you said something important, details matter here. We don't have many of them. I want to ask you about capacity, though, because if this many people are knocking on your door, the president's already announced the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge up for drilling. Does Alaska have a roadmap to create the capacity to answer this demand?
We do. There's no doubt about it. The National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska right now is probably the hottest oil basin in the world. And by the way, just on the Senate floor today, we passed my Senate resolution to pull back Biden's shutdown of the NPRA. Bipartisan, by the way. So we have the capacity. We literally have about 50 to 100 years supply of conventional natural gas on the North Slope. The key is getting this project off the ground, which again, the Trump administration has been great on. The One Big Beautiful Bill has an energy financing facility that we're going to use to get that done. We got federal loan guarantees in the infrastructure bill for just this project. And I'll tell you this, right now, Glen Farm, which is the private sector developer of this project, has already subscribed over 50% of the capacity of this project through letters of intent. And this is a 20 million metric ton per annum project. So there's a lot of countries, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, who have already signed up with LOIs. That's why I meant, you know, China needs to get in line, but I think this project's moving fast and it's moving forward, and the Trump administration has had a lot to do with that.
Interesting. And you've got the pipeline and the means of transporting that to get to port for these nations?
No, the key thing is we got to build the pipeline. Now, look, we're building it in 2 phases, and that's the other element of this project where we've made huge progress. Worley is doing the feed work, the front-end engineering and design work. Glen Farm has put out the requests for steel and other inputs. That's coming in right now. They're talking about a final investment decision by the end of this year. And the feed work being done before the end of this year, that's real progress. And once you get that done, then we're going to move forward on phase 1, which is the pipeline, and phase 2, which is the LNG exports to our Asian allies.
I want to ask you, Senator, from your position on the Armed Services Committee, about an important issue that the president has brought about, and that involves nuclear weapons tests. It's something that we haven't seen in this country since the early 1990s. I actually remember what a big deal that was when this stopped. But we, again, are wanting when it comes to some details. Here's what the president said about this on his way home.
Yes, I would be going to Asia in a few weeks, and heck, I may be going sooner than that. I'll get debriefed from all the dialogues and all what must be done promptly in the follow-up. Could be heading there very shortly. But I don't know about that right now. But of course, Asia is the center of the world economy after the United States.
That was, of course, Secretary Chris Wright, Senator. Apologies. You were referring to that interview a little bit earlier. What is this going to mean for our nuclear stockpile? Is it safe? Why would we start doing this again now?
Well, look, first of all, we're modernizing all three legs of the triad, and that's really, really important. We need to do that. The intercontinental ballistic missiles, the submarines, and the strategic bombers. We have to do that. That just makes sense, and we're putting a lot of effort into that with the administration. So that's number one. You have to keep our triad safe and up to date. In terms of testing, for decades, Joe, we've been doing essentially simulations. We haven't done, testing, live testing in decades. But I think what the president's getting at is essentially this issue of reciprocity. If our adversaries are doing that kind of live testing, then we should be looking at it. I think that's what his tweet was about. But this goes to the broader issue of peace through strength. We are building up our military strength, but as Secretary Wright just said, we're also building up our energy strength. The Russians fear American energy probably more than anything. It's a weapon that we can use against them. And that's, again, why I'm so thankful that the president promotes Alaska everywhere he goes. We have all the resources, critical minerals, oil and gas that our country needs. It makes my state stronger, but it makes America stronger. And I think that's a message the president and his team have been sending strongly.
We also have some questions about Nvidia with regard to national security, Senator. The president just a couple of days ago was reportedly set to offer Blackwell chips to China. Apparently, that was not something that was included in their meeting. Do you think that should be on the table, or does that make you concerned that China will have access to high-tech chips that it currently does not?
Well, look, there's a really important debate going on that. The bottom line is we got to win the AI race against China. And and we're winning it right now, and that's not just chips. I know, Joe, I sound like a broken record, but that's energy, right? American energy is key to the AI race. You've reported on that a lot. The balance with regard to the chips is whether or not we think not having any chips go to China is going to enable them to create a homegrown chip capacity that can someday outcompete us. But it's a balance that goes back and forth. I know the different agencies in Washington, D.C. and the Trump administration are looking at this differently. The bottom line is the policy that matters is we got to win the AI race. If China wins the AI race, you want to talk about danger to our national security. That is going to be very significant. I think it's the number one issue we're working on here in D.C. But energy, American energy, has got to be a key component of that ability to beat China on AI.
Yeah. You can't separate the two, Senator.
No.
Are you flying home this weekend? I mentioned the shutdown. It's day 30. Do you trust the air traffic control system?
I go home every weekend, Joe, and I spend a lot of time in airports just because
you sure do.
I love getting home to my beautiful state, my great constituents. But I'll tell you this, you and I talked about it, you're right, almost 28 days ago. This is still the Schumer shutdown. In the Senate, my Democrat colleagues on the Senate, Democrat side in the Senate are frustrated. And it's not with us. It's not with Donald Trump. It's with Chuck Schumer. Look, we voted last week to pay people who are federal workers who are doing their job because they're required to. There's nothing more American than paying people for work. And yet every Democrat, with the exception of 3, voted against that common sense bill. Pay our troops, pay air traffic controllers, pay TSA. Chuck Schumer's whipping all these Democrat senators to vote against stuff like that. It's maddening. It's the Schumer shutdown. We've now voted 13 times to try to reopen our government with a short-term CR. By the way, that contrasts with the 13 times during the Biden era that we all voted for a short-term CR to keep the government open, including Chuck Schumer. So he's got a perfect record, 13 times voting to keep the government open under Biden, and now 13 times to keep America shut down under Trump. It's hypocrisy, and I'm hoping my colleagues will buck their leadership, Democrat colleagues, and vote with us and open this government. It's starting to hurt people.
Well, so much for lucky 13, Senator. I am blown away that the talking points haven't changed in 30 days, but I want to say happy belated Alaska Day to you. And when we get details on this deal with China, come back and talk to us. Republican Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska.
Joe. Thanks a lot.
Good luck getting home. Absolutely. Coming up, Apple and Amazon reporting earnings after the bell, sending stocks moving in after-hours trading, and they're both, at the moment, moving higher. We'll get details from Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow. Also, more on the potential security issues at play between the U.S. and China following the presidential sit-down in South Korea when Anja Manuel, executive director of the Aspen Security Group, joins us up ahead. This is Bloomberg TV and Radio. It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. We're following breaking news after the bell. Another big earnings session here with Apple and Amazon dropping their latest quarterly reports. Amazon stock soaring now, some 14% in after-hours trading. Right out of the gate, it popped, while Apple delivering mixed results. That stock has turned higher, shaking earlier losses to pick up about 4%. For all the details now, we turn to a special edition of Power Moves with Ed Ludlow, the host of Bloomberg Tech. He's with us live from our San Francisco bureau. Ed, why don't we start with Amazon, since this apparently was the coiled spring. Is this all about AWS or more?
Yeah, coiled spring is one way of putting it. Because all of the other cloud companies or hyperscalers have gone first, there was anxiety going into this quarter, and then Amazon and Amazon Web Services smashed it out of the park. AWS has returned to 20% growth. It hasn't had that growth level since the end of 2022. And what they're able to demonstrate is very tangible data that all of the massive investment into AI has paid off. Amazon has also invested very heavily in custom silicon, and it was able to give one figure, or at least an expression, which is that the Trainium 2 chip, its in-house chip, is now a multi-billion-dollar business. We've seen historically that when Amazon does that, gives us some kind of description of the health of AI-related businesses, they grow. There were one-time charges in the quarter for Amazon because of severance and layoffs, and that will continue into the current period. But they're also able to use that cloud business, which accounts for the majority of operating income, to offset the retail business where they kept prices low to keep the consumer in this tariff environment. Then there's Apple. The catalyst that swung Apple from a decline to a gain of now 5% was commentary from the CFO, Kevin Perek, that going into the holiday quarter, they're seeing revenue growth of 10 to 12%. Remember that the quarter that Apple just reported ended September 27th. The new iPhone 17 went on sale September 19th, so you only have 8 days of data. There was a very big miss in China that they haven't explained yet, and tariffs hit this company, $1.1 billion in the quarter. A lot more questions.
Amazing. Ed Ludlow, the host of Bloomberg Tech, breaks it down for us perfectly, giving us a sense of what we might see tomorrow morning. You can catch Ed, of course, alongside Caroline Hyde every morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's 8 a.m. Pacific, right here on Bloomberg TV. And while President Trump says that Nvidia's Blackwell chips were not discussed during his meeting with China's Xi, the two world leaders were able to reach a one-year truce on other trade matters. The U.S. agreeing to cut the fentanyl tariff, extended the existing truce on reciprocal tariffs. Meantime, China will be resuming soybean sales and rare earth flows. The agreement is seen as being able to stabilize relations between the two countries rather than resolve fundamental differences or deal with long-term issues. Both sides buying time, essentially, to further reduce dependence on each other. Joining us now with her perspective on President Trump's meeting with President Xi, Anja Manuel, Executive Director at the Aspen Strategy Group, former diplomat. Anja, it's great to see you and welcome back to Bloomberg TV and Radio. Were you left wanting? Was this progress? It's difficult to tell beyond a truce what was actually accomplished other than going back in time a couple of weeks.
Yeah, good to be with you, Joe, and great to see Senator Sullivan on here, who's my former colleague from the State Department and a member of the Aspen Strategy Group. So thanks for having all of us on. I think this agreement was mostly fixing the problems that both sides created for each other in the last 9 months. You listed it off. Rare earths is paused. Thank God we didn't compromise on our export controls. I think that was a good thing. We lowered some tariffs. The Chinese agreed to restart soybean purchases, but there was not much in here that was structural. So if you look at the big overcapacity issues, the forced tech transfer, all of those fundamental issues that American companies have with the Chinese economy, I didn't see too much resolution on those.
Okay, well, this is interesting. One of the things that actually came from this meeting, to your point, the resumption of soybean sales to China, about a dozen tons this year, 25 tons in the next couple of years ahead. But there was already an agreement like that with the first Trump administration going back to 2017. China never made good on those purchases. What would be different now?
Yeah, well, I hope they do make good on them. I think this is actually a difficult thing for the Chinese because in the meantime, so much of the soybean market has moved to Latin America, especially to Brazil. And with currencies being where they are, it's actually much more expensive for the Chinese to buy American soybeans. But I hope for the sake of our farmers that they will.
Are Blackwell chips really off the table, or they just ran out of time?
I don't know. I do think when you're talking about this tech competition between the U.S. and China, I do think export controls play one important role, and that is just to make sure that the most cutting edge things like the chips and the equipment to make the chips, we don't give to the Chinese. Sometimes export controls can get too broad and it actually ends up harming our own companies, but I think it's a good thing that if right now the Blackwell chips to China are off the table, that would be positive.
Well, I keep hearing Back to the Future and similar references with regard to this meeting and the results from this meeting. Did we essentially just go back to the starting line in our trade relationship here in this Trump turn? Are we basically starting over again?
I don't know. This was a handshake deal. There's a lot to be worked out. And I hope that there's now a pretty workmanlike relationship between Bessent and his counterpart. I think Marco Rubio has a good relationship with Wang Yi. And so I hope that this meeting between the two presidents is just a starting point and we actually start addressing some of these difficult issues. Also, in addition to trade, not a lot of discussion of what's going on the security side between the two countries. Yeah. And that is increasingly dangerous. So let's hope we keep talking.
Well, we're struck indeed by some of the other things that were left out. It wasn't just Nvidia. The president said Taiwan didn't even come up, which I find fascinating. And we got nowhere on TikTok, Anja. What's going to happen with the app?
I don't know what's going to happen with the act. You and I have even had interviews on this. This has been a saga that's been going on, I think, since 2020. So it's anyone's guess what happens with the TikTok deal. I do think on the security issues, it might be okay that Taiwan didn't come up. It's very tense right now. And I would say on the positive front, the Trump administration has really continued to the military-to-military dialogue that Biden and Xi negotiated in 2023. And the Trump administration has, to their credit, really continued that. So that's important.
The president says he's going there in April. We'll see if it happens. Anja Manuel, executive director of the Aspen Strategy Group. It's great to have you back on the heels of this meeting. And coming up, Vice President J.D. Vance hosting airline executives today at the White House as the shutdown continues to impact air travel. Now on day 30, we're going to discuss the details with Republican Congressman Sam Graves, who chairs the House Transportation Committee and got caught up in some of the issues at the airport today. His story next on Balance of Power, only here on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We have one singular purpose, and that is to reopen and fund the entire government. The Democrats do not get to shut down the government and then make the decision on who's more important than the other and which little thing they want to fund to relieve their own political pain. We have one purpose, and that is turn this thing back on. And all those other efforts are deviations in its political games. They're trying to cover their own tails now because they know they have inflicted this pain.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, where we heard from the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, a bit earlier today. They're discussing the shutdown that has now entered its 30th day without any end in sight. Yeah, we got to a month here, and those comments come as a coalition of over 24 states file a lawsuit against the Trump administration, demanding that SNAP funding continue during the government shutdown. The suit alleging the suspension of benefits is, quote, arbitrary. For the latest on all this, we turn now to Bloomberg's Megan Scully, who joins us live here in our Washington bureau, runs our Capital Influence team. And 30 days into this, we still don't know how it ends here. Megan, what about the drive to fulfill SNAP benefits? Because that date on November 1st was supposed to be another inflection point.
Right. November 1st is a big date for a number of reasons, SNAP being a big part of that. The judge today seemed skeptical of the administration's argument and, did indeed think it was a bit arbitrary. Remember, the administration has been moving money along to fund both the military salaries and law enforcement salaries. And there is a contingency fund for SNAP in particular, in addition to other contingency funds for the government. Yeah. But there's about $5 billion in that, which could get them through a big chunk of the month.
The president has taken moves to fulfill paychecks for military, for federal law enforcement. Do we have any sense of where the White House is on this?
Where the White House is on SNAP?
Yeah. Or is this a cudgel or a Democrat program, as he calls it?
It's certainly a cudgel that they are hoping to use to keep to bring the shutdown to an end. We saw that play out on the Senate floor just yesterday when you saw John Thune, who is usually a pretty even-keeled guy, the Senate Republican leader, get very, very angry on the floor, and there was a lot of tension between him and the Democratic senators who were trying to push SNAP to be funded. Now, he doesn't have a unified caucus, though. There are other Senate Republicans, including Josh Hawley from Missouri, who's very nervous about not funding SNAP come Saturday.
That is another attempt at solving this legislatively, but even if it passes in the Senate, it's going nowhere in the House, right?
Exactly. It would be more messaging. Of course, they could always bring it up, and you see it in the House when they gavel in to one of their just pro forma sessions. But the House has been out of town since September 19th, and they haven't actually taken a roll call vote since then.
Imagine that. It's been, what? It's been 45 days. That's incredible for the House.
Yeah, I think my kids' summer recess is about that long.
Saying a lot. Megan, thank you. Bloomberg's Megan Scully on day 30. Coming up, Vice President J.D. Vance hosting airline executives at the White House today. Yeah, it had to do with the shutdown and the impact on air travel. We'll discuss the details ahead with Republican Congressman Sam Graves. He chairs the House Transportation Committee. Up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew. We'll turn back to the ongoing government shutdown in a moment with our political panel, but first, the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief. Dutch voters choose centrism in yesterday's election as support for far-right policies seemed to falter. The Democrats' 66 Party, a pro-European group focused on the country's housing crisis, nearly tripled its support in Parliament, while the far-right Freedom Party lost a total of 11 seats, likely losing their role in the new government. The most likely path for the D66-led government would be a centrist coalition with the moderate Christian Democrats, the Green Left Labour Group, and the center-right People's Party. The fragmentation of the Netherlands Parliament makes the country among the slowest in Europe to form a government. Hurricane Melissa has devastated the Caribbean, killing now dozens of people in Jamaica, Haiti, and Cuba, causing more than $8 billion in damages. All international tourists are safe and accounted for, we can report, though airports in Jamaica have shut down, leaving 25,000 stranded. Melissa is the strongest storm to ever hit Jamaica and is expected to weaken dramatically as it enters cooler waters in the North Atlantic tomorrow. With less than a week now till the New York City mayoral election, a new poll from Quinnipiac highlighting a key generational divide among likely voters. Democratic nominee Zoran Mandani leads with 43% support among likely voters. Independent candidate Andrew Cuomo receives 33% support. Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa gets 14% in this poll, while 6% remain undecided. This compares to Quinnipiac's poll earlier this month from October 9, showed Mamdani receiving 46% support among likely voters. We should note, Michael Bloomberg has endorsed Andrew Cuomo in the mayoral race and donated to a super PAC supporting Cuomo. Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Television and Radio. It's the shutdown, though, that's gripping Washington tonight. Literally, with members of both the House and Senate spending some part of the day stuck on tarmacs trying to leave Washington with staffing issues over the shutdown as the culprit. There were ground stops at a few airports just as the executives of the nation's largest airlines were at the White House, calling for Democrats to sign on to a clean CR and reopen the government. The question tonight, will an ensnarled airline industry be Republicans' trump card in the shutdown standoff? You see what I did there. Joining us now with their reaction to this and more, this evening's political panel. Jim Kessler, Executive Vice President for Policy at Third Way, our Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain, President CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Great to see you both.
Great to see you.
I feel like I should say happy day 30, but there's nothing happy about it. Dust off your crystal ball. You've been right all along, and I just keep hearing that while background rank and file talks are happening, there's still no off-ramp. Can the airports change that, and what are you seeing in the weeks ahead?
So there's not an official off-ramp. There are more discussions taking place than have been prior. And it's unfortunate that it happened. I had a friend that actually was involved in it today. But not letting the senators fly out of here does not make them happy. Mm-hmm. So they might be willing to, like, okay, this is now affecting us. We don't like this, because they rush to the airport. Like, do not get between them and an airplane.
Yeah.
So that may help. I mean, they've all kind of come back. Some of them got out, but a lot of them have come back. So maybe they'll talk over the weekend and we'll be able to get something accomplished. I do think Tuesday night, the elections in New Jersey, the Prop 50 in California, and the Virginia governor's race. I said that before.
Yes.
I didn't see any real movement until after the 4th.
That's interesting. We heard a similar take ahead of the No Kings rallies. We're now hearing that refrain frequently, that nothing's going to happen. You got to get through the elections next Tuesday. Jim Kessler, I heard your former boss, Chuck Schumer's name, I think 10 times in our conversation with Dan Sullivan. The Schumer shutdown. We're on day 30. How far does this go?
I do think the next... It's not really a forcing mechanism, but a dynamic is the election, as Sarah was saying, November 4th. Like, here's the situation. There are a lot of Americans who are feeling some pain about the shutdown. Mm-hmm. Very few politicians are feeling pain right now. Like, Democrats are saying to their Democratic office holders, stand strong. I imagine that's happening a lot on the Republican side. Mm. But then an election will happen, and if Democrats do well on Tuesday, and to me doing well means winning New Jersey, it's really pretty much assured they're going to win Virginia, and then winning Prop 50, the ballot initiative. Then it looks like I think Republicans will feel like we're in trouble. Democrats have already drawn a line. It's health care. I think health care is going to be the key to getting out of this.
You mentioned that a lot of politicians are not feeling the pain. Several prominent politicians ended up stranded on tarmacs today because of ground stops. And I want you both to stand by, because joining us right now is one of them. Someone who is scheduled to join us from Bloomberg's New York headquarters, but due to a series of travel delays today, Congressman Sam Graves of Missouri joins us now by phone, chair of the House Transportation Committee. Congressman, it's great to see you. I'm curious to hear what happened today at the airport.
Well, there was a ground stop at JFK here in New York, and due to a variety of things, staffing and weather, and then now I'm stuck in traffic due to weather.
Did you get out of the airport, and how long does this ground stop go on for? Did they lift the ground stop? Was it due to staffing?
It did not. We went ahead and flew into Farnsboro and at Republic Airport, so we were able to do that, and then that's what's caused the problem, obviously, with traffic, because we have to go a lot farther, or come a lot farther to get into the city.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you know a lot more about this than most people, and I'm wondering if this has in any way changed your perspective on the shutdown, because I suspect there's going to be more of this where this came from. Should there be a separate bill, for instance, to pay air traffic controllers?
Well, that's a good question, and I know the president is looking to try to figure out how to continue or how to pay air traffic controllers, and they are absolutely going to feel some pain. Now, I got to commend them, though. They're coming into work. They're showing up, and the bigger problem, though, is just overall staffing. We are short thousands of air traffic controllers, and it isn't going to compromise safety in any way, but there are going to be some delays. That's going to happen.
So what can you do from your position on your committee or from within the Congress here to try to alleviate these pressures? You just made clear we didn't have enough air traffic controllers to begin with. If it's not actually paying them during the shutdown, is there anything that the FAA can do, that you can do on your committee to help prolong their ability to work?
Well, passed a great FAA reauthorization just last year. A very bipartisan bill. It passed out of committee unanimously and got 387 votes on the floor of the House. And then was signed into law. And it addressed the air traffic control shortage and changing some of the hiring practices and making sure that we get the best people into those positions. And I can say this, and Secretary Duffy worked very hard to get this done, but they filled every single seat at the Academy this year, all 2,000 seats, and that hasn't happened in some time now.
That's good news in the long term. We're looking... Understood. We're looking at images right now of Vice President J.D. Vance, who held a meeting with airline executives and other industry representatives, including Chris Sununu, today at the White House. Congressman, he predicted that the holiday travel season could be a disaster if this shutdown continues. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree, and families are going to suffer from that. And it's unfortunate because it doesn't have to be that way. If we could just reopen the government, pass the clean CR, reopen the government, we can start negotiating these points that both sides have. And it's extraordinarily damaging when you've got individuals that are more concerned about their primary politics than they are about the American people. And we got people out there that are going to miss their nutrition programs, are going to miss flights, as you pointed out, due to the holiday season. They're going to miss paychecks. It's going to be not good at all. So we need to end this thing and get back to the table, get back to work.
There's been some talk around a continuing resolution that would essentially last a year, going to December of 2026. Jason Smith, who chairs the House Ways and Means Committee, told us on the air he would support such a move if it keeps the government open. Would you?
Yes, if it keeps the government open, that is one of the options that we are looking at, of course.
You know, our viewers and listeners should know that you're not only chair of the Transportation Committee and got bogged down in this mess today, but you're also a pilot. Is it safe to fly right now, Congressman? Will it be safe to fly in weeks from now?
It is safe to fly. And I was on a plane today, and I will be on a plane again tomorrow. One thing that the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, made very clear is we will not compromise on safety. We will have delays, but we will not compromise on safety. And that's an absolute fact. It is safe to fly. That's not going to be the problem.
We hope you get to where you're going safely, Congressman. Republican Sam Graves of Missouri, we thank you, as always, for the insights. Back with us, our political panel, Jim Kessler and Sarah Chamberlain. What do you think of what we just heard? This is the chairman of the Transportation Committee getting caught in a ground stop. I guess that means it could or would happen to all of us.
Right, absolutely. It can happen. I will say Secretary Duffy is doing a good job. Yeah. I mean, we digress a little bit, but what Newark was running there, I mean, my daughter didn't even know what floppy disks were. I mean, that's how scary it is. So Sean Duffy has stepped it up. What's going on now is because of the shutdown, the Schumer shutdown. And we have got to get this reopened, and I'm sure we can deal with the ACA. We can compromise on that.
Did this fulfill any of your vision on how this ends?
Well, I just want to say that in the first 7 months of this year, so pre-shutdown, there were more ground stoppages, tarmac delays of 3 hours or more in the first 7 months of this year than 2022, 2023, and 2024 full years combined. Yeah. And that is because of what DOGE did. And I think Secretary Duffy is doing a good job. And he was the first cabinet official to say what DOGE is doing and these crazy layoffs that we saw with, the RIFs that we saw with air traffic controllers was a disaster. Look, this is going to be decided when health care is decided. And I think it's going to be decided after November 4th.
I mentioned the meeting that J.D. Vance held today at the White House. Interesting opportunity to get in front of cameras while the president was flying home from South Korea. He had the CEOs of American and United Airlines there. He had industry trade groups represented, some other representatives from Capitol Hill as well. Let's listen to what he said when he spoke with reporters after.
They are trying to take a hostage, and we can't reward that behavior. If we do that, if we say, yes, of course, we'll give you everything that you want if you reopen the government, you know what's going to happen? In 3 months, they're going to come back to the administration, and they're again going to say, we're going to shut down the aviation industry. We're going to deny people SNAP benefits unless you give us exactly what you want. That's how a child behaves. That is not how a responsible governing party behaves in the United States of America.
So, Jim Kessler, that represents what we hear from a lot of Republicans here on Bloomberg TV and radio. What is your response?
So I think this is one of the reasons why Democrats feel like they're doing well in sort of the messaging battle on this. Because Democrats have a single message on this, which is there's 20 million people whose health insurance is going to rise somewhere between 20% and 100% if we don't continue these ACA subsidies, and that's what they're fighting for. So they have a singular message, and Republican messages, like it started out with sombreros on Hakeem Jeffries, and then it became like the Schumer shutdown, and so it's like it's moved from X to Y to Z, and Democrats are saying like we just want a deal on health care, on Obamacare. This will help 20 million people. Let's do it. So I think it's one of the reasons why they've stayed firm.
It does strike me that if Democrats wanted to pass the clean CR, November 21st is in like 5 minutes. Right. We would find ourselves in another budget fight and a potential shutdown again before the end of the year, would we not?
If they say, okay, we're willing to compromise, we believe you that when the Republicans say we do want to do the ACA fix, we have to open the government first, I think probably the House would have to do an extended CR. You can't, the 21st, you're right, it's right on top of us. So maybe till the end of the year, and then that will give us time to negotiate ACA. Because the president, Senator Thune, and the speaker have said, we'd like to fix ACA. Like, we understand this is a problem. But for some reason, Democrats don't seem to believe them when they say that.
And I don't blame them for not believing. Like, it's gone on for 30 days. We could have solved the problem in those 30 days. Now, I do think we're going to see some movement after November 4th. You do? I do think. And
you both agree on that? Yes.
Members are talking to each other. That is definitely happening right now. So I do think there's going to be movement. But like the president said this on day one of the shutdown, like, yeah, we're going to have to do something, on healthcare, on the ACA. We got to fix that. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, now we know what the solution is. He just told us.
Well, 30 days have gone by here.
30 days have gone by.
And the president went overseas, of course. He's back at the White House now. And I want to ask you both about an important issue that we've been talking to lawmakers about, and that is the potential sale of high-end AI chips made by Nvidia to China. There are, of course, export controls involved here. Currently, China is not allowed to buy Blackwell chips. Earlier this week, it was said this would be on the table. Listen to D's and R's expressing concern over this idea.
The key difference here is that these Blackwell-level chips allow the Chinese to train new models. AI is absolutely critical to the competition of the 21st century: economic, political, social, and military. So I would not put that on the table.
We are far ahead on the AI frame, but we want to make sure that we stay that way. When you're a rival like we are with China, we want to be able to make sure that we keep our competitive advantage.
And all I could say to President Trump is this, which is, look, this is one area where we maintain a lead, that we will continue to maintain a lead on, but it only will exist if we don't kind of do damage to our standing by exporting these chips to the CCP.
I think we found a new coalition here. Do Main Street Republicans have a position on this?
Not yet, but they are talking about it, and they are a little concerned. Absolutely. It is China. I mean, it's China's always concerned them. A lot of them sit on the committee. So, yes, they're concerned. But, again, they haven't all been in town yet to really talk about this. Just happened. So there will be a lot of discussion before the president gets to do this, if he even ends up wanting to do it.
Well, and that remains a big question. That didn't even really come up or was addressed specifically in this meeting. Apparently, Jim, if we assume what the president is representing is correct, do you worry, though, that we're mortgaging our national security to make money with China?
I am worried. Trump called this meeting a 12 out of 10, and I just don't know what scale he's looking at here. And look, I think something is very evident, which is Xi Jinping spent the last 5 or 6 years figuring out, if Trump is elected again, how do I have a stronger negotiating position with him? And I think he figured him out. I think we got taken to the cleaners.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what. He's back at the White House, as I mentioned, and it's almost Halloween. Can we show what's happening in the driveway of the South Lawn right now, just outside the portico, live at the White House? If you're with us on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, the president's got the USA red MAGA hat on, and he and the First Lady are handing out candy for Halloween. I just saw Steve Miller go by with his family and Katie Miller. There was a time when, by the way, reporters used to bring their kids to this, but that was a long time ago. Is this part of the job, Sarah Chamberlain, for this president who's not always known to enjoy this type of politicking?
Absolutely. Why not?
Is he getting good at it?
He is getting much better at it. Actually, I think in this case, the First Lady is helping him get better at it. But sure, why not? He's the president. Why not hand out Halloween candy to little kids? I mean, they do the Easter egg roll for years, and my daughter used to love going to that.
Do they have to step over rubble from the East Wing to get to the candy here, Jim? What's happening?
Yeah, I think people should dress as construction workers and go in and do something. But I think, this is not naturally what Donald Trump does best, this sort of... He's good at play acting, but not this type of play acting, but good for him.
Well, I guess so. Look, this is a man who has been overseas for quite a few days here, just flew overnight after meeting with President Xi. There is something to be said here, I guess, for the stamina, no?
Well, supposedly the First Lady asked him, like, I need you home for this.
I need you to get home for Halloween?
Yeah, happy life, happy wife, happy life.
Okay, very good. Pretty interesting. Boy, we had Spider-Man go by as well. This is really getting good, guys. It's nothing that I was expecting. When it comes to this White House, obviously this is a president who's back in town now, and I'm waiting for the order tomorrow to bring the lawmakers back. I'm coming up to the Hill to make a deal. Is that another potential off-ramp?
There is a feeling among Democrats that Republicans are just going to wait until Donald Trump says it's time to go. And again, a month ago, Donald Trump in the Oval Office, freelancing with his words, said, it's health care. We're going to have to do something about health care. So this is going to be about health care. And the president, he's got to snap his fingers and then everybody gets to work.
We don't have any minions so far. Do you guys remember when you put the candy on the minion's head? I'm also wondering, do we have anything from the pool on what kind of candy they're handing out? I'm guessing that these are full-size candy bars.
Maybe.
Sarah Chamberlain, does Donald Trump end the shutdown by calling everyone together at last?
I believe next week, again, after the election on the 4th. I would tell you, Republican Main Street Partnership is actually standing up next week and doing events because so many of our members are going to be in town.
Interesting.
So they're already planning on coming, and that's not Donald Trump hasn't talked to them yet about it.
Are they waiting for that call, though? Is that the buzz when you talk to members?
They're waiting for something.
Right.
That's it. I mean, they're really waiting for Chuck Schumer in the Senate to say, okay, we're going to move forward with this and open up the government.
Got it. I can tell you, by the way, from the White House press pool, the first couple is handing out full-size Hershey bars and Twizzlers in boxes with the presidential seal. Pretty cool souvenir.
Yeah.
Jim Kessler, Sarah Chamberlain, thanks for celebrating Halloween with us. Who knew? Check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online. And thank you for joining us on Balance of Power. That was sweet. This is Bloomberg TV and Radio.